Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadi alladhina astafa ma ba'd. So continuing off inshallah with the book Hidden Blessings. Wisdom number 15. Understanding the true meaning of striving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hakim al-Ummah Mawlana Shafaritani rahimahullah mentioned that there are two ways of achieving the ultimate objective of this path. One is difficult while the other is easy. So why not choose the easy way, especially as it yields the same results? By no means does striving for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake, meaning mujahida, entail unnecessarily putting oneself through difficulty. If there is a well here in the madrasa in Thanabawan and another in Jalalabad, which is 2.5 miles away, would you consider it more virtuous to fetch water from Jalalabad in order to make wudu? Striving through difficulty and spiritual exercises are not the objective. However, they help in achieving the objective. The point is, achieving the objective does not require abandoning all enjoyment and pleasure. It only requires abandoning some enjoyment and pleasure. So, this wisdom, Mawlana Shafi'itani rahimahullah, understanding the true meaning of mujahida, right? So, juhad itself, linguistically, one of the definitions of juhud is badl wusa', right? That a person is exerting themselves in some type of effort, regardless of whatever it could be, right? You have every human being making some type of effort in order to acquire, a materialistic objective, or any type of tangible goal, or something that's not tangible. So, for example, you have the kuffar, what they're like ذَلِكَ مَبْلَغُهُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ, right? Their goal and intent is to acquire and amass the dunya, whether it be status, money, prestige, honor, degrees, whatever it could be. And if you look at this qaida, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the beginning of Surah Ankabut, وَمَنْ جَاهَدَ فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ لِنَفْسِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَغَنِيٌّ عَنِ الْعَالَمِينَ. That whoever strives, you're just striving for your own self. Right? Because inna Allah laghaniyyun 'anil 'alamin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free and independent from the world. So nothing, your effort and struggle that you're making to acquire your goal, to acquire your objective, right, to gain your status and prestige, that is for your own self. This, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this as a general rule in the beginning of the surah. This is applicable for anyone, right? If a non-believer, disbeliever, he makes effort in acquiring something and he struggles with that, he'll eventually acquire it. You find people, for example, all these different stories, right? Someone coming from a impoverished background and they worked and they strived, right? They got into this college and then became like the first, the first woman astronaut, or first, some ethnicity to go into some field. Right? They made an effort, and at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them that, right? The results, and they achieved the results of the effort. But at the end of the surah, in Surah Ankabut, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention? In the same surah, Jazakullahu Khairun, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those that strive for our sake, then we'll guide into our paths. So in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned a general rule. The man jahada فَإِنَّمَا يُجَاهِدُ نَفْسِهِ, it's for your own self. But then when Allah, at the end of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions those that strive for our sake in order to acquire us, our pleasure, our reward, then we're going to help them. We're going to open the ways for them. We're going to guide them to our paths. So what is the meaning of juhud now? So as Mawlana Shafi'itani rahimahullah is mentioning, see, in tazki and tasawwuf, okay, you have mabadi, right, zawaid, and maqasid, right? He's mentioned Anfas Isa, a book that one of the khulafa of Mawlana Shafi'itani rahimahullah wrote. It was compiled basically like the crux of what tasawwuf and the aqwal of Mawlana Shafi'itani rahimahullah. So in tazkiyah, you have things which are like the muqaddamat, this is the preface. You need to know those initial things and have knowledge about that in order to, first of all, engage yourself in this path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Then there's those things which are considered zawaid, those extra things. They come and they go. That's not the maqsood. They come and they go. And then there's the maqasid, which are the objectives that a person is trying to acquire and achieve in their life, in their path of suluk and getting closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, for zawaid, a person doing dhikr, Now they're getting, like, they're having complete full concentration, right? Getting the ladha of dhikr, right? The taste of reciting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc., so on and so forth. That's zawaid. That's not a maqsad. If your entire life, you go out, you pass your entire life without feeling the ladha of doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though you're punctual. If you go out, you pass your entire life being punctual upon salah, right? Be it farad, nawafil, tahajjud, all of that. And you don't find the ladha in that. And you're not able to achieve that goal of, praying salah without any distraction at all and any ghairullah thoughts coming in your mind. Again, that's zawaid, right? What is maqsad? Is implementing sharia, right? With the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These things, these ladhat, right? For example, in tazkiyah, people, okay, they think they're going to get dreams and all these, I must see good dreams and all that. You can be the most pious person at the time, and you see a dream in yourself. Mawlana Rahimahullah mentioned in his khutubat, if you're the most pious person at your time, and you see a dream that you're eating khinzir, a pig, that's not going to make you far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can be a person that's not even implementing sharia, and they see themselves in the dream, they're in Jannah, or doing some weird, right, some close ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That dream is not going to do anything. Right? You actually have to do something in the physical realm, in the physical dunya. So, this is something where a person, Mawlana Rahimahullah was mentioning the mujahida that a person is making. That's not the maqsad. That's a wasila. Right? Many things in tazkiyah and tasawwuf, the adhkar and the different mujahidat and these exercises that the mashayikh prescribe to the students, they're not the maqsood. Right? So people think of it as the maqsood. Those outsiders think of it as maqsood. They say, okay, this bid'ah and things like this. And those that are inside and the students and murids, they say that they get stuck on the wasila. You're not supposed to be stuck on the wasila. You're supposed to. The wasila is a means of attaining the goal, which is the maqsood. So mujahida, what he's mentioning, that's not the maqsad. Right? The different mashayikh in different eras, they had different prescriptions that they would give to students, right? Just as, for example, Anbiya, if you look at all the different Anbiya that were sent, right? If you look at the mu'ajizat that they were given different mu'ajizat in accordance to the time and in accordance to the people that were sent to. Like Musa alayhi salam was the epitome of sorcery at the time. So what was he given, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him like his staff, and that turned into a serpent. Right? So because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to show those people that, okay, you don't have any sorcery. I'm the one that's in control. Right? At the time of Isa alayhi salam, medicine was at its pinnacle point. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the different miracles to Isa alayhi salam, right? Curing the one that has leprosy, bringing back the dead the dead back to life. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave those mu'ajizat according to the era and the people that he was dealing with. At the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, balagha and shi'r and just eloquence and poetry was at its epitome. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam ummi that didn't know. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not taught how to read and write, and he was reciting Quran, which was the epitome of balagha and eloquence and rhetoric, and no poem could compare to the Quran. Right? So in accordance to each time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the different mu'ajizat with the Prophet. So similarly, in each time, there was different spiritual exercises which mashayikh gave to students. So when you start reading, for example, the previous books of Tasawwuf and Tazkiyah, for example, the books of Imam Ghazali, the books of Ibn Ata'Allah Askandi rahimahullah, you'll find them telling their murids or telling students to do different spiritual exercises. For us, it might not make sense. But again, that exercise was there to attain a goal. For example, one exercise that they would give, if someone was afflicted with arrogance, right, or conceit, what they would do is they would tell the person, okay, dress in ragged, torn, worn out clothes. Go in the city, okay, dress as a beggar, have, like a pot or a plate, and go around begging people for money. What was this? The purpose of this was to destroy the nafs, right? Destroy that arrogance, that the kibr, and the ujab that was inside the person's heart. Again, that was a means to attain something. Now, however, as times passed, generally mashayikh will never prescribe that. Now they'll say, okay, do this dhikr or do this type of muraqabah or reflect over this ayah, to remove this spiritual sickness. So in each era, the spiritual exercise differed, right? It differed for the people at that time in their era. But again, the spiritual exercise was just an exercise to acquire the maqsad, which is what the rada of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, in our day and age, what do you consider as mujahida? Two types, tazkiyah and tasawwuf itself goes back to two things, is that you're removing bad qualities from your own self, right? And you're adopting good characteristics. So the mujahida is in abstaining from sins and removing those evil characteristics or habits that a person has. And on the other angle, it's adopting good qualities. So the purpose of all the different spiritual exercises that we might have heard about and the previous mashayikh gave to the students, it was to attain these two objectives. So in our day and age, for example, as Mawlana was giving the example, there's two ways, right? Either you go the way of the Salaf al-Salihin, that you basically abandon all types of ladhat. You're always opposing your nafs to the extent, right? Even if your nafs is not telling you to necessarily do something sinful, it's still you're hungry, you want to eat something. Okay. Now you're like, no, I want to go against my nafs. I'll eat, but I'm going to eat very little. And on top of that, I'm not going to eat food which I typically enjoy. Right? I'll eat like plain bread or something which someone might not like. Okay, that's one way, right? You're putting strain on your nafs, that is there, okay, and that will, train your nafs, and in a way, your person will get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that's not the objective. Whereas another person, for example, they might follow the sunnah, whatever they're provided with, they'll eat in accordance to the sunnah. Right? So there's two ways. One is completely abandoning all pleasures, which previous mashayikh prescribed to the students. And then one is obviously following the sunnah and trying to adopt good characteristics and remove bad qualities. So Mawlana Shafi'i giving the example that with the well, right? The purpose is what? Wudu. The purpose is to make wudu. One well is closer, one well is farther. So why are you going to go to the farther well when you have the ability to go to the closer well? So when it comes with mujahida, however, this is not saying that mujahida itself should be left out completely. No. As I mentioned, mujahida goes back to two things in the era that we live in, which is abstaining from sins, removing bad qualities and characteristics, and secondly, that a person adopts good qualities. So, when removing bad qualities, what are you doing? You're always fighting your nafs. Right? That's your mujahida. That's your struggle and effort. You're always going against your nafs when it tells you to do something, which is simply from your own nafs. Okay, a person gets angry for wrong cause. Okay. Their child didn't listen to them, or family disputes, husband, wife, whoever. Okay. Now they get angry. Was it anger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or was it for the nafs? Majority of times it's our nafs that's getting angry and we want to lash out or take revenge on the other person because of our nafs. So in that moment, you suppress your nafs. You suppress your anger at that moment because it's not for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Famous story, Ali radiallahu anhu, when he was fighting and he had the mushrikeen on the ground, he was about to kill him, right? And what happened, he spat, I believe it was a mushrikeen or a Jew, he spat on him. Then Ali radiallahu didn't kill him. Because immediately he realized his attention that it wasn't for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I would have killed him out of anger that he spat on my face. Right? That's what Sufyan Thawri rahimahullah mentioned. Ma a'alajtu shay'an ashadda aliyya min an-niyya. The most hard, I never encountered or dealt with anything more difficult than making intention. Because intention, you always have to, tasheehun niyyah, you always have to rectify your intention. You always have to keep your eye on your heart. What is my intention for doing the action? From the beginning till the end, in the middle, the entire time you have to make sure it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So, the mujahid regarding a person, abstaining from sins. In this day and age, that's very difficult. Right? Because we are surrounded in an environment of people just sinning and following the nafs. Right? أَرَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ هَوَاهُ أَرَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهُ هَوَاهُ أَفَأَنْتَ تَكُونُ عَلِي وَكِيلًا. Right? Have you seen the person that takes his nafs as his own ilah? And everyone else is following nafsi. Like the i'jabu kulli dhi ra'yin ra'yahu. As the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, a person is fascinated by their own opinion. They always want their opinion to be the final word. And that's what the time and era that we're living in. Whereas when a person right, when making mujahid against your own self, you're going to remove that quality. You're going to remove that quality. And just as it's mentioned, what is the maqsood? That the quality is removed, but you should. This is another point in Tazkiyat al-Tasawwuf, is that the maqasid, adopting those good characteristics and removing those bad qualities. Say, for example, your entire lifetime, you were addicted to a sin, right? And you made tawbah from that sin, and you tried to refrain from that sin, and you kept falling back into it. And the entire life, it was back and forth battle. One day you refrain from it, next day you fall back and do the tawbah again. You didn't achieve the maqsad of removing that bad quality from your life. Or maybe you were striving to gain the quality of being generous, sakhawa, or having hilm, tolerance, being forbearant, but you're not able to acquire it. That's completely fine. What is in our responsibility? What is our job? Is to make the effort. Is to make the mujahidah. The outcome, the maqsood, that's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't focus on that and become so despondent, because this is another trap of shaitan, is that when you focus on the maqsood so much, and if you fail to attain that goal, then what happens is the person becomes despondent and says, okay, that either Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like me, He doesn't love me, or the wasa'il that I'm using are completely wrong. Like I need to do another thing. Even though what he was doing was completely fine. Doing dhikr, being punctual in salah, making mujahid against his nafs. Right? So the maqasid also, the objectives, it's not within our hand. You're striving for that, but it's not within your hand. So those mujahidat that you're doing to adopt good characteristics and to remove evil qualities, even if you don't achieve the objective, it's okay. Because that is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why you have, for example, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned, if you look at that wording of the hadith, right? Talabul ilmi faridun ala kulli muslim. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned talab. He didn't mention husul. He didn't say attaining. He said seeking knowledge. Because attaining, some people, they may seek, they may try, but they might not be able to memorize every single thing that they learn. Or they might not be able to properly acquire it, but they're striving to acquire it. That person is going to be rewarded because he's doing what's within his capacity. He might not be able to achieve the actual goal of retaining all the knowledge and acquiring all of it, but he's doing what's within his capacity. So that's a key note that a person needs to keep in mind when making mujahidah, right? Mujahidah is not the maqsad, it's a wasila, right? It's a wasila. And juhud, right, in this day and age, living in this society, we're not accustomed to it, right? In Ibn al-Arabi in Ahkam al-Quran, in Surah Ahqaf, he mentioned under the ayah, أَذْهَبْكُمْ طَيِّبَاتُمْ فِي حَيَاتِكُمُ الدُّنْيَا وَاسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهَا. That ayah, right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically talking about the kuffar, that they will be addressed on the day of judgment, that you used up all tayyibat, all of your good things in the dunya. You're not going to have anything now. Right? And he mentions under that the story of Umar radiallahu anhu. He passed by Jabir radiallahu anhu, and Jabir radiallahu anhu was eating meat and bread and had some basically good food at that time, and according to that era. So he told him, he became upset. Umar radiallahu anhu became upset. He said, "What are you doing here? Right? How are you eating this type of food?" And he recited this ayah, أَذْهَبْتُمْ طَيِّبَاتِكُمْ فِي حَيَاتِكُمُ الدُّنْيَا وَاسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهَا. So Ibn al-Arabi, rahimahullah, what he mentioned here is that although this ayah is talking about the kuffar, right? But what is for a believer, how should he live his life? Is that don't habituate yourself on one thing. What do you mean don't habituate yourself on one thing? For example, with food. You shouldn't be that, no, I can only have biryani, I can only have like desi food or Arab food or whatever it could be. Because what did Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He had food, he ate. He didn't, he was okay. He was patient. That's ideally how a person's nafs should be. That you have, whatever food you have, alhamdulillah. If you don't have, alhamdulillah. If you have good food, like the best food, alhamdulillah, you don't forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't have the best food, you have simple food, alhamdulillah, your hal doesn't change. But in order to acquire that kayfiyah and that hal and condition, you do have to make effort against your nafs. Right? You do have to strive and try to polish your nafs and your soul and your heart to acquire that. But you shouldn't be like habituated that, no, it has to be this way and that's it. Because what? Your nafs just wants that. Your nafs just wants. And that's the purpose of mujahid, that when you do these different fighting against your nafs, trying to remove those bad qualities and adopting good qualities, a time eventually comes, whether at the end is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but a person will have those qualities in which in every condition they're happy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, regardless of what they do. And remember one thing, see, our heart, right, it's concealed. Our spiritual heart is concealed. So we might not necessarily see the effects of it, right, the effort that we make. But if you want an example, right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name is Al-Qadir Al-Muqtadir. He has power and He has capability over everything. So a person, when they want to, right, they want to gain muscle and they want to get mass, right? People go to the gym and they have these diets, protein diets. So what do? They have a certain routine, weekly, monthly routine, right? They abstain from certain types of foods, eat, protein shakes and a lot of protein. They go to the gym, work out, etc., all of that. What happens? They see the results, start seeing the results after a week. So what is that showing? They're putting the effort on their body, and then it's growing. Muscles are growing. Now, if a person were to put the same effort on their heart, a change will come also. Why? Is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Qadir Muqtadir. For Him, everything is equal. Everything's equal, meaning it's all easy. For us, we may think, okay, wait, it might be difficult for me to actually change my heart, whereas in exercising and growing muscles, I can see that. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's the same. For us, we're thinking that, okay, it's different. But it's wherever a person puts the effort, that's what's going to happen, right? For example, many of the students if you look at the students in the different years, each student has some different skill, because skill as far as the ilm, that they were focusing on one branch more, right? From the initial years, they're focusing on that branch more, so hence they refine that branch and that branch of ilm, right? Whether it be writing Arabic, or, for example, speaking Arabic, or ilm in hadith, or in fiqh, or usul fiqh, whatever it could be, right? They focus on that more. They put an effort more on that, hence that grew. So wherever a person puts their mujahida, their effort in, that will have a result, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned, "Man jahada fa innama yujahidu nafsi." Right? So the mujahida in this day and age, again, it's going back to the fact that a person has to curtail their nafs, right? Don't follow your nafs, abstain from sins, and remove a person's bad qualities. Simply making dua and doing dhikr is not the solution. Right? Simply making, Mawlana Shafi'i rahimahullah mentioned this also, just making dua and doing dhikr, that's not the solution. You actually have to go against your nafs. You have a bad quality, for example, a person has a bad quality of being greedy. So simply just making dua, Ya Allah, get rid of my greed and make me generous, and just doing dhikr and awrad, that's not sufficient. You actually have to fight it. And how would you fight it? Anytime that feeling comes of greed, right? When someone asks for money or whatever it could be, and you feel that inside your heart, I don't want to give, right? That feeling of being stingy, that's when you give, right? Eventually time comes in where a person, they're always opposing their nafs. Then what happens is, in Anfas Isa was mentioned that madda kamzor ban jata, right? That quality basically becomes very weak, the bad quality. It might not be completely removed, right? It might not be completely removed. A person's anger might not be removed. But what happens is the person has, control over it. So they're able to control their anger in accordance to Sharia, right? They're able to control their greed. Their greed is not is not controlling them. Whatever bad qualities a person has. That's the objective, right? You might not be able to remove certain intrinsic qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to a person, but again, what is within your reach and capacity, making the effort to removing it and adopting the good quality. To the extent that your nafs becomes a bit weakened, right? And you have control over those bad qualities. So this is what it's referring to here, that making mujahida, right? It's not leaving tarku dunya, as I mentioned last week. Zuhud is laysat izahadatu ida'atul mali wala tahrim al-halal, right? It's not just wasting, squandering money, just making every halal thing haram, right? It's rather you have your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever He has. It's not on what you have and what your nafs has, and you're always content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so that's wisdom 15, understanding the true meaning of striving for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now wisdom 16, prescribed poverty. Hakim al-Ummah rahimullah said, a Sufi need not wear tattered rags or have nothing but a shawl in his possession. On the contrary, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed someone with expensive clothes, he can become a Sufi while still wearing those very same clothes on the condition that he does so in the correct and prescribed manner, that is, with noble intentions. So what does it mean by prescribed poverty? A person is trying to, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave fada'il, right, mentioned, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned a hadith regarding about the virtues of fuqara, right? يَدْخُلُونَ الْجَنَّةَ فُقَرَاءُ الْأُمَّةِ قبل الأغنياء ب500 عام أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام, the fuqara are going to enter to Jannah before the rich of this ummah 500 years, meaning half a day, and because one day is equivalent to 1,000 years, so that's why it's mentioned 500 years or half a day in different riwayat of the hadith. So there's two aspects here, like in Awarif al-Ma'arif is mentioned in one of the books of Tazkiyah, is that you have the fuqara. Those people, they look at the hadith and the virtues of being a faqir. So even if they're given money, they don't want it. Right? They'll rather live their life as a faqir and very, like miskeen, basically. That's one status. And you have those others that they've reached the status where they don't care. They have money, they don't. Because they look at it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me in this condition, and He wanted me to be in this condition. So I should be happy with this. So here, this is prescribed poverty. This is referring to the first condition. Mawlana Shafi'i rahimahullah is saying that a person, because they may see, the fadail of being not having a lot of dunyawi commodities in mata', right? So they want to adopt the qualities of being a faqir. Okay? Because they think all the Sufiya were just fuqara. Well, that's not true. All the Anbiya were not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made some Anbiya very rich, like Sulaiman alayhi salam, Dawood alayhi salam. Right? We look at the Sahaba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made some of the Sahaba, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, Uthman radiallahu anhu. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them rich? So that each person in this dunya, those people that will come about in the ummah, they can look at the different Sahaba. Some people's, their condition is going to be like Uthman radiallahu anhu. Others is going to be like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave examples from the previous ummah, from amongst the Salaf al-Salihin, from the Anbiya, those that didn't have a lot of money and those that had money. But what was the common factor with all of them is that they were pleased in whatever condition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put them in. Because being, and just the definition of a Sufi, right, itself, why is it called a person called a Sufi? That's a separate topic, but Sufi meaning having that ta'alluq with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having good characteristics, having zuhud in a person's life, having the ta'alluq with the akhirah, not with the dunya, all those things affiliated with the Sufi. It doesn't mean that a person has to be faqir, then he can only become a Sufi. No. A person that's rich, a person, whether they're living in America, whether they're living in Africa, whether they're living in Australia, wherever it could be, they can gain these they can be considered, quote unquote, a Sufi also, regardless of where they live, whatever the hal that they are put in. Because those qualities are not contingent upon a person being a faqir. Yes, a person that is considered as a faqir is a bit easier because when a person doesn't have a lot of wealth, a person doesn't have a lot of commodities, their focus is mainly upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the akhirah. When a person has more dunyawi commodities, then the person generally loses concentration, they lose their focus, right? But not everyone is like that. Right? So here a person, the Mawlana Shafi'i rahimahullah is mentioning that, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you bounties and blessings. Use them in the proper manner. Don't squander and don't waste, don't do israf and tabdhir. And use it for your own self and for others also. Right? So I give this example for students. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you a lot of money, okay, a person likes buying like good watches for their own self or good clothes. Technically, fi dhatihi, it's halal, it's permissible. But I tell them, okay, if you, just as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi mentioned, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, right? That you like for your own self good clothes or watches, whatever it is. Okay, you buy yourself a good watch. Why don't you buy the same equal watch or whatever the equal amount of money, donate it to someone, give it to a faqir, give it to someone in need, right? That way you're also fulfilling the right of someone else, and you're using the ni'mah for your own self also. That's what those of us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given different bounties, whether it be ilm, whether it be mal, whether it be some skill that we have, it's not for our own self. Right? It's for you to take benefit and give benefit to others. Right? It's for you to take benefit and give benefit to others. Mal, Imam Qurtubi rahimahullah mentioned the example of mal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving the example of this dunya and mal with water so many times in the Quran. Right? Why did he mention this? He mentioned the ulama of tafsir give many different reasons. But if you look at water, see, water, if it becomes stagnant in one area, what happens? Discolored, right? It becomes a bit filthy. So similarly, if wealth, if it just remains with you, you're not letting it flow. Just as how if you don't let water flow, what happens? That wealth will become a wabal upon you, right? It won't be good for you. Just as water, another example, another reason why the similarity between mal and the dunya is wealth. Right, or water, if you use impure or dirty water to, irrigate and water your plants, what's going to happen? They're going to die. Similarly, if your wealth is not halal, if it's haram, whatever you use in it, you don't get any reward, and it's going to be detrimental and harmful for you. Right? And if you want your wealth to actually benefit, you have to let it flow. Right? You are basically a vessel. Okay, be it mal or whatever it is, or as mentioned, any skill. You're a vessel, we're all vessels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us certain things so that we can take benefit for our own selves and also give benefit to others also. This is part of infaq, to spend whatever you have. Right? So again, going back that the purpose of a person is not supposed to become a faqir in order to become a Sufi. Right? Or in order to gain those characteristics and qualities of a Sufi. Right? Whatever condition you have, you can still become that. Okay, it's a matter about making that effort and to adopt those qualities and restrain from sins. So we'll stop there, inshallah. We'll do a bit of adhkar, inshallah. Istighfar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أستغفر الله ربي من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه 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 أستغفر الله ربي من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. We'll do durud. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. لا إله إلا الله 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 لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وعلى كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من زوال نعمتك وتحول عافيتك وفجاء نقمتك وجميع سخطك. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. وصلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وأجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.